Hello everyone, welcome to the second part of the poem The Darkling Thrush by Thomas Hardy. Here in the second part I am going to explain the rest of the poem along with the critical appreciation. Don't forget at the end of the video to like, share and subscribe to my channel for more such update. Stay tuned, and for the ones who did not know about the first part of The Darkling Thrush, I am going to send and share the link in the comment section. Please do look into the first part before moving on to the second part. Okay, let's now move on to the second stanza of the poem The Darkling Thrush. In the second stanza, as you notice that there is reiteration of the bleak and the depressing winter landscape throughout the first and the second part, and also in the later part it has been reiterated more clearly in these two parts. The land's sharp features seemed to be the century's corpse outlined, his crypt the cloudy canopy, the wind his death lament. So the sharp features of the land, the sharp features of the native land, the place where Thomas Hardy belonged to or from where he was writing the poem, seemed to him the century's corpse outlined, means the century, the end of the century, marked as if the death of the century. Every century will end and begin once again, but unlike the other ones where there is a ray of hope with the start of every new century, here with the end of the century it marks the death. There is no more hope in the poem, not that the poet can find any more hope anywhere, neither in the surroundings and nor in the nature itself, and nature it also is behaving in a very gloomy and depressing way. The century's corpse outlined his crypt, the cloudy canopy. So the century has been compared to the corpse. His crypt means the burial place, as if the century which has been personified is buried. And the cloudy canopy, the sky has been compared to the canopy. The cloudy canopy, the sky is also gloomy. The sky is also gloomy. There is no amount of hope or there is no amount of hope or happiness in the sky itself. There is no amount of hope or happiness in the sky itself. It is behaving like a tomb over the burial place of the century. It is marking as a tomb over the century's burial place. The wind his death lament. So everywhere, even nature, the wind, the sky, behaving like the spectre grey, as you have noticed in the first stanza. The dregs, it is desolate. There are some marking words, you will see that the death lament, the words like desolate, the weakening eye of the day. All these point to the gloominess, the lack of faith, the lack of hope. There is the pessimistic tone for which Hardy and his poems were famously known for. All these are very clearly highlighted, at least in the first 4 lines of the second stanza, and which you will notice in the later part also. The wind is, so here we see that the wind is singing the death song of the century. So the end of the century, what is the wind also behaving like? The wind is also singing the death lament. It is howling as if there is no music. The music, the wind, when the wind blows, at times it is pleasant for us to be in the wind, in the presence of the wind, even if there is no music. There is a note of discord in the atmosphere. You see in the first stanza, if you compare, there is the mention of broken lyres. Here there is the mention of death lament. So constant reference to the death, decay, lamentation. The ancient pulse of germ and birth was shrunken hard and dry, and every spirit upon earth seemed fervorless as I. So the ancient, why the mention of the word ancient? Ancient means that the century is dead, it is no more there. So it is past, the past life, the pulse of life, the vibrancy of life, of germ and birth, Jar means seed, from the source from which the life sprouts. That source of life where there was vibrancy, where there would be the birth of new hope, new ideas, optimism, was shrunken hard and dry. That ancient hope, beliefs, ideas, they have now become hard and dry. When does the seed, when does something become hard and dry? It becomes hard and dry once it is dead. So death means it is the end of hope. And but one thing we must also keep in mind, that death does not necessarily mean the end of hope. Death also marks the beginning with the help of birth. But the birth that the poet sees here is in starking contrast. Why? Because the ancient beliefs, the faith which he followed, which he believed in, there has been a total death. I will also mention later that Hardy had a very strong belief in Christianity, but he lost that belief early in his life after he read Auguste Comte and also Charles Darwin's The Origin of Species. The belief that man had evolved, or man were children of God, that belief was shattered. And when the new scientific ideas or treatises came, he found it very, not only he, there were many other poets like even Matthew Arnold, found it very difficult to reconcile with this idea. And every spirit upon earth seemed fervorless as I. So everyone, he is including himself among all the other people of the era, all the people of his native land, all the other poets of the probably that who were contemporary, who had equal crisis in faith, everyone had lack of spirit, everyone was listless, everyone was fervorless. And here I signifies, as you understand, the poet speaker. Everything outside and within that energized him, that was the source of vitality for him, that has died. There is nothing that is enough to give him any ray of hope anywhere. Wherever he is looking to, whatever the surroundings is, it is totally gloomy. And this gloominess, this darkness, this desolation, this despair strikes the readers to a very great extent. And we, with this note of sadness or gloominess, we move on to the next stanza, the third stanza. What do we notice in the third stanza of the poem? At once a voice arose, the bleak twigs overhead, in a full-hearted even song of joy ill-limited. An aged thrush, frail, gaunt, and small, in blast-beruffled plume, had chosen thus to fling his soul upon the growing gloom. So we see that to hear that voice that gave the poet little bit, and also the readers little bit, a ray of hope, it took him 2 stanzas to get to that voice. Probably the voice was there, he never noticed it, he was too busy with the gloominess, he was too busy in participating in the desolation to notice the voice of that bird. Nevertheless, at once, the mention of the word at once suggests the suddenness. The voice that the poet hears is important for 2 reasons. The poet is attracted by the voice, firstly, and secondly, as you will see in the description in the next 4 lines of the third stanza, that the bird or the thrush is not very pleasant to look at. So, probably if someone sees such an unpleasant appearance of a bird, in that gloomy atmosphere where the bird also seemed to resemble the gloominess and the despair and the lack of optimism, there the poet probably also thought that what hope or what sound else can the voice give. Nevertheless, the voice that came from overhead of the twigs, overhead bleak twigs, the sadness and the despair of the bleak twigs, because it is winter, the plants and the trees are dead, there is no leaf. No leaf means no life in the trees. Okay, so that is why the mention of the bleak twigs. This bleak twigs is strongly contrasted with the full-hearted even song. You see that I have mentioned here that the sadness and the happiness is strongly contrasted. So the voice of the bird or the voice of the thrush is mentioned here in a full-hearted evensong. What is an evensong? An evensong is a prayer or a song that is sung in the evening, generally in the church, to God. God is the eternal listener, so for him as a prayer it is sung. So what is the thrush doing? The thrush is singing in a full-hearted, means it is singing from the bottom of its heart. It is happy, it is blessed. Only when you are happy or blessed can you sing a full-hearted song, or you can pour out your heart in a full-fledged way, expressing your happiness. So unlimited. Here another thing that I would like you to notice is the word ill-limited. Reading poems, you must have noticed that you did not, or probably very few times, came across this word ill-limited. This unique use of the word suggests that the voice or the bird that is appearing, the message that the poet or the bird is trying to convey will also be unique. This poem also will be unique. So everything, this little word also suggests that there is something that is in excess. The ray of hope that the thrush is throwing out of its soul or of his soul with the help of his song is unlimited joy, excess of joy. An aged thrush, frail, gaunt and thin. So and the thrush was aged just like the poet. How do we know that the poet was aged? Because when the poem was written in the 1900, he was aged 60. So similarly, like the poet, the bird was also aged. It was frail, gaunt means thin, and small. So there was nothing very positive about it. There was nothing very good about it. There was nothing to look up to, basically. But nevertheless, the bird, unlike the poet, remember, unlike the poet, not like the poet, unlike the poet, is singing the song of happiness, is singing the song of hope. It is putting his soul into the song to sing upon the growing gloom. So the word growing gloom is important. It has two meanings, metaphorical as well as literal. The growing gloom is the despair, marking the faith of the death, marking the faith or the death of the century, with the death of the century. And another is the literal. How is it literal? Because in the first stanza, remember, we already got the weakening eye of day, means it is twilight. So the growing gloom, with the setting of the sun, gloominess sets in. So everything is ending, and in spite of that gloominess, the bird is singing in a full-throated way. The poet also reminds us here that the darkling thrush, the thrush appeared out of nowhere, out of the darkness. If you try to light a matchstick in the darkness, you will see that it will attract your attention more than if you try to strike a match in the light. So the ray of hope is much more evident when it is the darkest. And the mention of the word darkling, the poem itself, the title of the poem, the darkling thrush, that itself is very important, because the word darkling emerges from the word dark, as you can simply understand, and it has immense history. It was first mentioned in John Milton's Paradise Lost. I am not sure whether you have come across Paradise Lost or not, but you can always refer to it in your in other texts. In Google also you can search up John Milton's Paradise Lost, book 3. The mention is there. Then John Keats, means you must have heard of John Keats. John Keats uses the word darkling in Ode to Nightingale. And most importantly, the contemporary of Hardy, where this this pessimism, this striking loss of faith, this crisis is very clearly stated in Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach. Here also it will be very appropriate to compare Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach, where he uses the phrase, the darkling plain. So the recurrence of the word darkling off and on symbolizes the total crisis. And in the midst of that crisis, the thrush, as if born out of the darkness, appears to sing its song of hope. Okay, one thing that here you must have noticed that I have also mentioned, that here in this stanza, the constant to and fro motion of the poet is very clearly stated. See, at once a voice arose. So the moment in the darkness the poet hears a voice, there is a ray of hope. Okay, what is that voice? What am I hearing? So immediately your attention, along with the reader's attention, is drawn to that ray of hope. Next, again he moves back to the bleak twigs. Again he moves on to the full-hearted evening song of joy illimited. Again he moves back to the depressing appearance of the bird, the aged thrush, frail, gaunt and small. Again he moves to sing, to point out how the bird is singing in a full-fledged way from the bottom of his soul. Again he moves that the bottom of, in spite of he is singing the bottom of his soul, there is growing gloominess. The gloominess, as if he is still confused whether the bird will be capable, who is so frail and gaunt, will be capable of fighting that gloominess or not. But again, the note of ambiguity, that is confusion. Ambiguity means confusion. The note of ambiguity is clearly stated, as you will notice in the fourth stanza also, that the bird is singing with a ray of hope. He knows, the bird knows that it is weak. The bird knows that there is winter. The bird as if knows that there is growing gloominess in the atmosphere. Yet, it is trying to sing. It is trying to keep up with the, it is trying to fight the hopelessness of the situation with the help of its song. Isn't it? So, here it is very important to note that you can compare, personally I think that you can compare this song of the bird with Shelley's the line, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? So there is always a ray of hope somewhere or the other to look up to. Only thing is that you have to fight with the situation. Okay, so now let's move on to the fourth stanza, the final stanza. So little cause for carolings of such ecstatic sound was written on terrestrial, afar or nigh around, that I could think there trembled through his happy good night air some blessed hope whereof he knew, and I was unaware. So what is the poet telling us? So little cause for carolings. In winter you generally celebrate Christmas. So in Christmas, carols are sung. So the poet Hardy is telling that what is the occasion for singing the carolings? Is there any hope? When you feel joy, then only you have the desire to sing. Then only you have the desire to sing carols. So where is that hope? What is the reason for singing the carols? There is very little reason for singing the carols. Of such ecstatic sound was written on terrestrial things afar or nigh around. So the first two lines you see that it is complete contrast to the hopeless situation, that there is no ray of hope, and yet the bird is singing carols, the bird is singing its songs in this crisis period, was written on terrestrial afar or nigh around, that the song as if was written for the people, the living or the earthly beings, for living far or near, far at a distance or near around. So the terrestrial things, you will notice that there can be two meanings. One is earthly, another is the material reality. The material reality means the things that we cling to. All the materials that you can think of that gives us material happiness or material pleasure. So whatever things that near or far that gives us a reason to be happy, there is nothing there. There is no occasion for singing carols. There is no ray of hope anywhere. There is no ray of nothing, not even material reality is giving us any pleasure or giving us any ray of hope, whether it is far or distant. So what is the source of the sound, or so the music or the happiness of the bird? That I could think there trembled through his happy good night air some blessed hope whereof, and I was unaware. So there must be something there must be something from which the bird is singing, and we, the readers, can only assume that the note of Shelley's poem, as I mentioned earlier, that if winter comes, can spring be far behind. Probably with that hope in his heart, the thrush is also singing its song. There is some blessed hope that somewhere this collapse of faith, this collapse of the religious ideals will be dissolved. The people of the past, the people of the present, science and religion will reconcile. The new and the old ideas will come together somewhere. There will be a happy reconciliation, and no one will fight a crisis. It is very difficult to accept the changes, but some old things have to be discarded in favor of the new. Some new things have also been discarded in favor of the old. So both needs to move hand in hand. So probably the bird is as if trying to send a message that he is carrying a message, the ray of hope, some source of happiness, some source of optimism, of which the poet himself was unaware. And here also you will see that there is constant interplay of hope and despair. So little cause for carolings. That means so there is no day of hope, of such ecstatic sound. Again happiness was written on terrestrial things afar or nigh around. Again sadness, that I could think trembled through his happy good night air. So as if it is singing the farewell song. In that farewell song, what is it? The poet cannot understand. He is listening to the song of the thrush, but the poet cannot understand what the song is about. Whether the bird is singing the farewell song of the as the century has died, or whether he is bidding farewell to the loss of faith, belief and hope that the poet, along with the other people of the century, other people of the era, were facing. What is it? The poet is unable to comprehend. And what does he do? This poem ends on a note of ambiguity. This quasi-religious poem means half-religious. See the mention of the word carolings, evensong. These refer to the poem as religious, but it is not totally religious. There is not mentioned that the poet is sitting and praying. The bird song is an offering to God. That is not mentioned here. So we cannot call this poem a totally religious poem. So this quasi-religious dimension to the poem makes it even more striking. And the song of the bird is totally mysterious. We are like the poet, because he does not give us the clear hints what the thrush is trying to tell. Whether the thrush's song is marking the beginning of the new era where they can look up to, or whether it is again repeating or reiterating their hopelessness, but just looking simply with the garb of hopefulness. The poet in himself is confused, and he also leaves, we can also interpret it in that way, that he leaves up to the readers to interpret, whether you choose to look up to nature, whether you choose to look up to nature to draw inspiration from it, or simply ignore it and pass it as another state of the mind. So there is a note of ambiguity to the poem, and the poet ends here as he is unable to comprehend on the larger frame of humanity. So a few things before I end the poem, and I'll talk about some critical points here. I already mentioned about the darkling, the bird being born out of the darkness.